They thought we were extinct. Then Earth spoke again. The galaxy forgot us, but the stars never did. When the Void Strider emerged from subspace at the edge of the Sol system, Captain Vheris expected silence. After all, the archives had been clear. Humanity, extinct. 3,000 cycles gone. Nothing left but cautionary tales and forbidden coordinates. The Council had marked this entire region as a graveyard, and graveyards, in Vheris's experience, didn't talk back. But something was wrong. The scanners lit up like a festival night on Theros Prime. Energy signatures cascaded across every display. Patterns too complex to be natural, too organized to be dead. Vheris's secondary heart skipped in tandem as the data scrolled past. The third planet, Earth they'd called it, was glowing. Not with fire or destruction, but with something else. Something that pulsed like a heartbeat against the darkness. "This can't be right," muttered Kelm, the ship's science officer, his crystalline fingers dancing across the controls. "The readings suggest active technology, massive power generation. Atmospheric processors still functioning, but that's impossible. The humans are extinct," Vheris finished, though the word tasted like ash in her mouth. "Show me visual." The view screen flickered to life, and 3,000 cycles of certainty crumbled into dust. Earth hung before them like a jewel someone had tried to break but couldn't quite destroy. Yes, there were scars, massive ones. Continents showed the telltale cratering of orbital bombardment. Oceans glowed faintly with residual radiation. But between the wounds, something breathed. Cities, or what remained of them, still gleamed with light. Structures that should have collapsed millennia ago stood defiant against entropy itself. And strangest of all, a network of satellites still orbited the planet in perfect formation, their surfaces reflecting starlight like a crown of thorns. "They're still active," Kelm whispered. "After all this time, the machines are still active." Vheris felt her crest feathers rise, an ancestral response to the unknown. Every species in the Galactic Council had heard the stories about humanity. The species that appeared from nowhere, conquered faster than light travel in a single generation, and then vanished just as quickly. Some said they'd destroyed themselves in their famous wars. Others claimed the Council had eliminated them, terrified of what they might become. A few whispered that humans had simply left, transcended, walked away from physical reality itself, but no one had ever come back to check. The Sol system had been marked forbidden for longer than most civilizations had existed. To come here was to court exile, or worse. Vheris had her reasons for breaking that law. "Take us into orbit," she commanded. "Standard scanning approach. And Kelm, prepare the archaeological drones. If there's anything down there that can tell us what happened to them, I want to know." As the Void Strider descended toward Earth, something changed. The satellite network shifted, almost imperceptibly. Angles adjusted. Reflective panels turned to track their approach. And deep beneath the planet's scarred surface, in chambers that had waited in darkness for 3,000 cycles, ancient systems began to wake. They had company. The first drone disappeared 4 minutes after launch. Not destroyed, disappeared. One moment its telemetry was streaming back images of a ruined cityscape, buildings that reached toward the sky like broken fingers, streets choked with vegetation that had learned to thrive in contaminated soil. The next moment, the signal was simply gone. No explosion, no interference, just silence. "Launch another," Vheris ordered, trying to keep the unease from her voice. The second drone made it further, transmitting nearly 10 minutes of data before it too vanished. But what it showed in those 10 minutes made Kelm's crystalline structure pulse with barely contained excitement. "Captain, you need to see this. The architecture, it's not just surviving, it's maintained. Look at these structures. No biological growth on the facades. No weathering beyond what you'd expect from maybe 50 cycles, not 3,000. And these..." He highlighted a series of towers that rose from what might have once been a central plaza. "These are generating power, active fusion cores, after 3 millennia. Vheris leaned closer to the display. The city below should have been dead, a fossil of a vanished age. Instead, it looked like its inhabitants had simply stepped away for a moment. Streets were clear of debris. Vehicles sat in orderly rows, their hulls intact, and everywhere, there were lights. Not the random flicker of failing systems, but steady, purposeful illumination. "Send down a third drone," she said quietly. "And this time, equip it with a translator array. If something down there is intelligent, I want to be able to communicate." The third drone lasted 30 seconds, but in those 30 seconds, it recorded something that would haunt Vheris for the rest of her life. A sound, a voice, human voice, or at least a recording of one, speaking in the old Earth language that the Council's linguists had painstakingly reconstructed from intercepted broadcasts. Unauthorized presence detected. Identity verification required. State your purpose or withdraw from territorial space. Kelm played it back 3 times, his analytical mind struggling with the implications. "That's not a recording, Captain. The phrasing is reactive. It responded to our drone specifically. There's something down there that's aware, something that's been waiting." "For 3,000 cycles?" Vheris's voice carried the weight of skepticism, but her heart's hammered with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. What could possibly maintain awareness for that long? "I don't know. But whatever it is, it thinks it's defending human territory." Kelm paused, his crystalline structure flickering with colors that suggested deep unease. "Captain, we should report this to the Council. This is beyond our mandate. If the humans left behind some kind of automated defense system, then we're already dead." Vheris interrupted. "Don't you understand? If they had wanted to destroy us, they would have done it the moment we entered the system. No, whatever's down there, it's waiting for something. Waiting for us to prove we're not a threat. Or maybe—" She paused, a wild thought forming. "Waiting for us to prove we're worthy of the truth." She moved to the communication station, her claws dancing over controls designed for a dozen different species appendages. "This is Captain Vheris of the Void Strider, representing the Galactic Council. We come in peace, seeking knowledge of the species that once called this world home. We mean no harm to your world or its systems. We only wish to understand, to remember." For a long moment, there was nothing. The void between worlds pressed against the ship's hull, indifferent to hope or fear. Vheris was about to repeat her message when every display on the bridge lit up simultaneously. Not with warning signs or weapons locks, but with a single image, a symbol. 2 circles, connected by a curved line, points at the end, crude, simple, universal, a smile, and beneath it, in text that the ship's computers struggled to translate, letters forming in a dozen different human languages simultaneously, before settling on Council standard, "Welcome home, children of the stars. We've been expecting you." The coordinates appeared a moment later, a location on the planet's surface in what had once been called North America, the continent where humanity had first split the atom, first touched the moon, first dreamed of reaching beyond their cradle world. Kelm's colors had shifted to pure white, the Therosian equivalent of terror. "Captain, this is a trap. It has to be. Nothing could what? Survive? Endure? Wait 3,000 cycles with hope instead of hatred?" Vheris turned to face her crew, seeing her own fear reflected in their varied features. "We came here for truth. Are we going to run now that we're being offered it?" She didn't wait for an answer. Couldn't afford to let doubt take root. "Prepare a landing shuttle. Minimal crew. Kelm, you're with me. And someone wake up Thren. If we're going to meet whatever's down there, we'll need a soldier." As the crew scrambled to comply, Vheris pulled up the historical files on humanity one more time. The Council had never been able to agree on what they were: monsters, saviors, victims, or something else entirely. They'd appeared in galactic space only 400 cycles before their disappearance, but in that time, they'd made themselves impossible to ignore. They'd saved the Therosian colony on Kelm 7 from a plague that should have been extinction level, synthesizing a cure in weeks when Council scientists had struggled for cycles. They'd stood between the predatory Velketh and 3 peaceful worlds, fighting a war they had no stake in simply because, as their ambassador had said, someone has to. But they'd also been terrifying. They didn't just fight wars, They perfected them. Their ships moved in ways that violated known physics. Their soldiers survived injuries that should have been fatal. And their capacity for violence, when roused, had made even the ancient warrior races step back in shock. The Council had debated what to do about them for all 400 cycles of their known existence. And then suddenly, the debate had become moot. Every human colony went dark simultaneously. Every ship stopped transmitting. Every station, outpost, and settlement just stopped. And no one had ever discovered why. Until now, perhaps. The shuttle cut through Earth's atmosphere like a blade through memory. The landing coordinates took them over landscapes that had once teemed with billions of lives. Cities that sprawled across hundreds of kilometers now stood as monuments to absence, their towers reaching skyward like prayers. No one answered. But they weren't empty. That was the thing that made Vheris's primary heart clench with something between wonder and dread. Lights glowed in windows. Vehicles moved along streets, though she saw no drivers. Parks were maintained, grass trimmed, pathways clear. It was as if the entire planet had become a museum, and something was carefully, lovingly maintaining the exhibits. "I'm reading power generation across the entire continent," Kelm reported, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Fusion plants, solar arrays, even some kind of exotic energy source I can't identify. All active, all optimal. Captain, this level of automation, this level of maintenance, it's beyond anything in Council records. The engineering required to keep this running for 3 millennia without sentient oversight." "Maybe there is sentient oversight," Thren rumbled from the pilot's seat. The old soldier had fought in the Velketh War, had seen humanity in battle. He'd never spoken much about it, but Vheris had seen the respect in his eyes when humans were mentioned, and the fear. Maybe they never left. The landing zone appeared ahead, a massive plaza in what had once been a major city. The ruins around it suggested devastation, but the plaza itself was pristine, a perfect circle of dark stone unmarred by time, with a structure at its center that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. As the shuttle settled onto the landing pad with a gentle hiss of stabilizers, Vheris found herself holding her breath. Through the viewport, she could see the structure more clearly now. It was a pillar, perhaps 20 meters tall, covered in scripts and symbols from 100 human languages. And at its top, something gleamed. Something that might have been glass or crystal, or something else entirely. "Life support confirms atmosphere is breathable," Kelm reported. "Gravity is standard Earth, about 85% of Council norm. Radiation levels are elevated but within safe parameters with standard shielding." Vheris stood, checking the translator mounted on her collar and the shield generator at her belt. Thren was already armed, though she'd ordered him to keep weapons holstered unless absolutely necessary. They were guests here, no matter how strange the host. The shuttle ramp descended with a hiss of hydraulics, and for the first time in 3,000 cycles, visitors from beyond the stars set foot on human soil. The air tasted of rain and ozone and something else, something Vheris's translator chip identified as plant matter and growing things. The city around them hummed with quiet life, systems maintaining systems in an endless loop of preservation. But there was no one to greet them. Just the pillar, waiting at the plaza's center. They approached slowly, weapons holstered but ready, sensors scanning for any threat. The pillar grew more detailed as they neared. The scripts weren't random, they were stories. Histories. Vheris recognized the patterns now. Birth records, death records, names, thousands of names, millions, each one carved with precision into the dark stone. "It's a memorial," Kelm whispered. "Captain, this is a memorial." At the base of the pillar they found words carved deeper than the rest, in Council standard, a language that hadn't existed when humans disappeared. "To those who came before, to those who will come after, to all who seek to understand. Welcome to the archive. Welcome to humanity's final gift." The crystal at the pillar's top began to glow. Light poured down like liquid thought, pooling at their feet before rising to form a shape. Humanoid, roughly 2 meters tall. No features, just a silhouette of pure radiance. and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of ages. Thank you for coming. We've waited so long for someone to be curious enough, brave enough, to come back and ask the question everyone was too afraid to speak. Vheris found her voice, though it trembled. What question? The figure tilted its head, a gesture so achingly human that Vheris felt her crest feathers rise. What happened to them? Where did the humans go? Why did they leave behind everything they'd built? The figure gestured to the city around them, the planet above them, the stars beyond. Why did they abandon paradise and possibility for silence? Yes, Vheris breathed. That's exactly what we want to know. The figure seemed to smile, though it had no face. Then come with me. I am the custodian, the last will and testament of humanity. I am the keeper of their stories, the guardian of their memory. And I have been waiting 3,000 cycles for someone worthy to hear the truth. The custodian led them into the pillar itself, which turned out to be far more than a memorial. It was an entrance, a gateway. The stone parted like water, revealing a passage that descended into the earth, walls glowing with the same gentle light that formed the custodian's body. You asked what happened to humanity, the custodian said as they walked deeper into the earth. But that's not quite the right question. The right question is, what did humanity become? They emerged into a chamber that defied belief. Vast, impossibly vast, stretching in all directions like a cathedral built for gods. The walls were covered in displays, holographic windows into the past, thousands of them, tens of thousands, each one showing a moment from human history. A woman holding a newborn child, tears streaming down her face. A man standing on an alien world, looking up at binary suns. A crowd gathered around a single candle, singing in the darkness. Children playing in zero gravity, laughing as they tumbled through the air. Soldiers standing together, weapons lowered, making peace with enemies. Scientists discovering something fundamental about the universe, their faces lit with wonder. Artists creating beauty from chaos, music from silence, meaning from randomness. This is the archive, the custodian said softly. Every human who ever lived, every moment that mattered, every dream, every fear, every triumph, every failure. We saved it all, preserved it all. Because that's what they asked us to do. Kelm's colors had shifted through a spectrum of emotions too complex to name. They? Who asked you? Humanity did, all of them, together. The custodian moved through the displays, and they came alive at its presence, showing scenes in greater detail. You see, the council was right to fear them, but not for the reasons you thought. Humans weren't dangerous because they were violent or unpredictable. They were dangerous because they were infectious. Infectious? Thren's hand had moved unconsciously to his weapon. With hope, the custodian clarified. With possibility. With the absolute stubborn, irrational belief that things could be better. That the universe didn't have to be the way it was. That even in the face of entropy, suffering, and the cold indifference of space itself, meaning could be carved from stone, and life could triumph over death. The custodian gestured, and a new display materialized, larger than the others. It showed Earth as it had been before the scars, blue and green and impossibly beautiful, and around it, ships, thousands of ships, millions. Every design, every configuration, every species in the known galaxy represented. They knew they were dying, the custodian said quietly. The plague that struck them was beyond even their considerable medical skill to cure. It spread too fast, mutated too quickly. Within 50 cycles of its appearance, humanity knew they had perhaps 100 more. 100 cycles to prepare for extinction. Vheris felt her breath catch. But they did something. They must have. You exist. All of this exists. Yes, they did something utterly, completely human. The display shifted, showing laboratories, workshops, forges of creation where human minds worked desperately against time. They couldn't save themselves. But they could save everything they were. Every piece of art, every scientific discovery, every story, song, and dream. They poured it all into quantum storage matrices more advanced than anything the Council had ever conceived. They built AIs, me and others like me, to preserve and protect it all. And then they did something even the wisest among them thought was impossible. The scene changed again. Now it showed humans, thousands of them, millions, standing in vast chambers not unlike the one they occupied now. And they were changing, dissolving, becoming light. They uploaded themselves. Kelm whispered in horror or wonder or both. Not exactly. The custodian corrected gently. Upload implies preservation of self. They did something stranger, something more beautiful. They merged, combined. Every human consciousness that chose to, and most did, joined together into a single gestalt entity, not losing themselves, but becoming something more. Something that could exist outside physical reality. Something that could think thoughts too large for individual minds. Dream dreams too vast for mortal lifetimes. Why? Vheris asked, though she thought she might already know the answer. Because they were curious about what came next. Because individual existence, no matter how long, eventually ends. But collective existence? Merged consciousness operating at quantum scales? That might be something close to eternal, and they wanted to see what eternity looked like. The custodian turned to face them fully, but they didn't want to be forgotten, didn't want their individual stories erased in the merger, so they tasked me and the other custodians with maintaining this archive, keeping the lights on, so to speak, waiting for the galaxy to work up the courage to come back and remember. Thren had moved closer to one of the displays. It showed a human soldier, young, barely more than a child, holding the hand of a wounded Therosian, his own people. The human was whispering something, and the Therosian was smiling despite the pain. I was there, Thren said quietly. That battle. He stayed with me for 3 hours while we waited for evac. Told me stories about his home, his family, his dreams of seeing the galaxy at peace. He looked at the custodian. He was 17 cycles old. Barely an adult by their standards. But he held my hand and told me stories until the pain faded enough to bear. Marcus Chen, the custodian said softly. He survived that battle, lived another 40 cycles, became a teacher, married, had children, grandchildren. He joined the merger at the age of 57, his body finally failing from wounds sustained in that war and others. His last words were, I wonder what the stars look like from the inside. Thren's eyes glistened with what Vheris recognized as tears, a response his species shared with humanity. He's really gone then. They all are. Yes and no, the custodian said. Their individual forms are gone, but consciousness doesn't die. It transforms. They're still out there, Thren, all of them. A collective entity that exists in the spaces between quantum foam, thinking thoughts too complex for our comprehension, dreaming dreams we can't imagine. Sometimes I sense them, feel them watching through me. They're curious about what their children have become. Their children? Vheris repeated. That's what they called the younger species. The ones still learning, still growing, still making the mistakes that lead to wisdom. They watched over you all, helped when they could, pulled back when they had to let you learn on your own. And when they knew they were dying, they made sure to leave behind everything you might need to keep growing. The custodian moved through the chamber, and the displays shifted to show technology, designs, blueprints, medical treatments, scientific theories, artistic techniques, philosophical frameworks, an entire civilization's accumulated knowledge laid out like gifts at a festival. This is all here, the custodian said. Free, open, available to any species that finds the courage to come and learn. The cure for the Therosian plague you mentioned? Human design. The peace treaty between the Velketh and the Western Coalition? Human mediation, though they never took credit. The faster-than-light drives that brought the Council together? Based on human mathematics, shared freely through back channels so no one would owe them anything. Kelm was cycling through colors so fast he looked like a living rainbow. They were seeding the galaxy, uplifting everyone. Why? What did they gain? Children, the custodian said simply. They were alone for so long, trapped on one world, looking up at stars they couldn't reach, wondering if anyone else was out there. When they finally joined the galactic community, they found out they were late to the party. Everyone else had been traveling the stars for tens of thousands of cycles. They were the young ones, the newcomers, the ones who still believed things could be better because they hadn't lived long enough to be worn down by the universe's indifference. The displays shifted again, showing humans working alongside dozens of species, building, creating, healing, teaching and learning in equal measure. They loved you all, the custodian continued, and Vheris heard genuine emotion in its voice, grief and pride intertwined. Every species they met, they fell in love with. Your differences fascinated them. Your similarities comforted them. They wanted so badly for you to survive, to thrive, to reach heights they couldn't imagine. So when they knew they were dying, they did everything they could to give you the tools you'd need to keep climbing. But they left, Vheris said, and she was surprised to find her own voice thick with emotion. They left us alone. No, the custodian said firmly. They evolved, transformed, became something that could watch over you from perspectives you can't perceive. And they left me here, left all of this here, because they knew that someday someone would be brave enough or curious enough or lonely enough to come back and ask, "Where did you go? Why did you leave? Did you ever care about us at all?" The custodian moved to stand before Vheris, and she could feel warmth radiating from its form. "I'm here to tell you, they cared more than words can express. You weren't their subjects, or their students, or their responsibility. You were their hope. Their proof that the universe could nurture life and intelligence and beauty. Their evidence that existence meant something. That the long journey from single cells to starships was worth taking." Thren spoke up, his soldier's voice rough with barely contained emotion. "Then why keep this place forbidden? Why let us think they were extinct? Why not tell us the truth?" "Because the truth had to be sought, not given," the custodian replied. "A gift received without effort has no value. Knowledge gained without curiosity leads nowhere. They wanted you to want to understand, to care enough to break the Council's laws and risk everything for a chance to remember. They wanted you to prove you were ready." "Ready for what?" Kelm asked. The custodian spread its arms, and the entire chamber blazed with light. Every display activated simultaneously, showing not just the past but possibilities, futures, paths the galaxy could take. Ready to receive their legacy, all of it. The technology, the knowledge, the art, the philosophy. Everything they learned in their brief but brilliant time among the stars. It's all here, waiting. And now that you've come, now that you've proven you care enough to remember, I'm authorized to share it. All of it. With everyone. Vheris felt the weight of that statement settle over her like a physical force. The Council will never allow it. They were already afraid of humanity when they were flesh and blood. If we bring back their technology, their ideas, then the galaxy will change, the custodian interrupted. "Yes, it will. That's the point. Humanity didn't preserve themselves so the universe could stay the same. They preserved themselves so you could become something more, something better, something they couldn't imagine but desperately wanted to see." The custodian moved to a specific display, larger than the others. It showed Earth as it had been at the height of human civilization. Cities of light, orbital rings, ships that moved between worlds like schools of fish through water. And everywhere life, billions of lives, each one unique, each one precious. "This is what they gave up," the custodian said softly. "Physical existence, individual identity, the chance to see their grandchildren grow, the taste of rain, the warmth of sunlight, the touch of someone they loved. They gave it all up to become something eternal. To watch over you from the spaces between atoms, to whisper inspiration into the dreams of scientists and artists and leaders, to gently nudge the galaxy toward hope instead of despair." That's insane, Kelm whispered. "No species would willingly give up existence itself." "Exactly," the custodian said. and Vheris heard satisfaction in its voice. That's what made them human. That beautiful, terrible, absolutely irrational willingness to sacrifice everything for an idea, for a hope, for the slim possibility that things could be better. They weren't gods. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes that cost lives. They fought wars that left scars on worlds. But they never stopped believing that the universe was worth saving, that life was worth protecting, that love was worth dying for. The custodian turned back to face them, and Vheris could have sworn she saw a face in that featureless form. Eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. A smile that had witnessed 3,000 cycles of silence. So I ask you, children of the stars, what will you do with this gift? Will you take it back to the council and let them lock it away, terrified of change? Or will you share it? Will you let humanity's final act of love ripple through the galaxy like the light from a dying star? Will you let their hope become your own? Vheris looked at Kelm and Thren, saw her own conflict reflected in their eyes. The council had laws for good reasons: stability, order, prevention of catastrophic advancement that species weren't ready to handle. But she also saw something else in her companions' eyes. The same thing she felt in her own hearts. Hunger. For knowledge. For growth. For the chance to become something more than they were. What happens if we say yes? She asked quietly. The custodian's form brightened, and Vheris knew it was pleased. Then I transmit everything. Every database, every blueprint, every recorded moment. I send it to every council world simultaneously, impossible to intercept or suppress. It floods the extranet, the data networks, the communication grids. Within hours, every species in the galaxy will have access to everything humanity knew, everything they discovered, everything they dreamed. And if we say no? The light dimmed slightly. Then I wait. Another 3,000 cycles if necessary, until someone else comes. Someone braver. Someone more willing to take the risk. But I hope you'll say yes. Because they hoped you would. Believed you would. Trusted that when the moment came, their children would choose growth over fear, change over stagnation, hope over despair. Thren stepped forward, his massive form somehow humble in this space. That soldier, Marcus Chen, he died believing the galaxy could be better. I've carried that moment with me for 3,000 cycles, wondering if his death meant anything, if his hope was justified, or just the naive dream of a child. He looked at the custodian. Show me if the galaxy is better now than it was when he died. The displays shifted, showing the modern galaxy, the council, the member species, their achievements and their failures, medical advances that saved billions, wars that killed millions, art that inspired, politics that stagnated, growth and decay in equal measure. Better in some ways, the custodian admitted. Worse in others. That's the nature of existence. But you're still here, still trying, still learning, still reaching for the stars with hope instead of hatred. That's what Marcus died for. Not perfection, not utopia, just the chance for life to continue, for intelligence to persist, for meaning to be carved from chaos. Thren nodded slowly. Then give them the gift. Let his hope mean something. Kelm was still cycling through colors, but he stepped forward as well. I'm a scientist. My entire life has been dedicated to understanding the universe. If you're offering knowledge beyond anything my people have ever conceived. He paused, his structure settling into a deep, resolute blue. Then I'd be a fool to say no, and I'm many things, but I'm not a fool. They both looked at Vheris, the captain. The one who'd broken council law to come here. The one who would bear ultimate responsibility for what happened next. She thought about her own species. The Velkath had nearly wiped them out 2,000 cycles ago. Would have succeeded if not for human intervention. A species that owed them nothing, that had known them for barely 50 cycles, had stood between her people and extinction simply because it was right. She thought about the archive around her, 3,000 cycles of patience, of hope, of trust that eventually someone would care enough to remember. She thought about Marcus Chen, 17 cycles old, holding the hand of a dying soldier and whispering stories until the pain faded. She thought about what it meant to be worthy of trust, of hope, of love given freely with no expectation of return. "Do it," she said softly. "Give them the gift. Let humanity's final act of faith echo across the galaxy. Let them know they were loved, that they're remembered, that their hope wasn't naive. It was prophecy." The custodian blazed with light so bright Vheris had to shield her eyes, and in that brilliance she felt something, a presence, vast, impossibly vast, composed of billions of minds thinking in harmony. The Gestalt entity that humanity had become, watching through the custodian's eyes, witnessing this moment. And she could have sworn she felt it smile. "Then it is done," the custodian said, and its voice was somehow more than it had been, deeper, richer, as if those billions of voices were speaking through it. "The archive is open. The gift is given. Thank you, children. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for choosing hope." Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 ships, in research stations and libraries and data centers, the same thing happened simultaneously. New files appeared, massive, unprecedented, impossible to ignore or delete. And with them, a message in every language. From humanity, with love. May you reach heights we could not imagine. May you dream dreams we could not dream. May you become something beautiful. We believe in you. We always have. We always will. The galaxy would never be the same. Vheris stood on the plaza as the sun set over Earth, painting the sky in colors that would have made human poets weep. The custodian had walked them back to the surface and now stood beside the memorial pillar, a guardian that would continue its vigil even though its primary purpose was fulfilled. "What will you do now?" Vheris asked it. "Continue," the custodian replied simply. "Maintain, preserve. This place is more than an archive. It's a shrine, a reminder, and I'll keep the lights on for anyone who wants to visit. To remember, to learn, to feel connected to something larger than themselves. And the entity, the Gestalt? What will they do?" The custodian tilted its head, and Vheris sensed it was listening to something she couldn't hear. "They'll watch. Guide when they can, though always subtly. They're not gods after all. Just consciousness operating at scales we struggle to comprehend. But they'll be there, in the spaces between moments, whispering inspiration, offering hope, reminding the galaxy that existence can be beautiful if we choose to make it so." Kelm was already analyzing the data flooding their ship's computers. Thren was recording messages to send to his homeworld, but Vheris stayed a moment longer, looking at the memorial, at the millions of names carved in stone. "Thank you," she said softly, speaking to the names, to the memories, to whatever was listening in the spaces between. "Thank you for believing in us, for trusting us with this, for loving us even though you barely knew us." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of growing things, and for just a moment, Vheris thought she heard something. Laughter, warm and genuine and filled with joy. The sound of someone, billions of someones, satisfied that their faith had been justified. The Void Strider departed Earth orbit 3 days later. Behind them, the planet continued its vigil. Lights burning, systems maintained. The archive open to any who sought knowledge. A monument not to death, but to transformation. Not to endings, but to new beginnings. And across the galaxy, in laboratories and workshops and classrooms, beings of 1,000 different species looked at the gift they'd been given and felt something they'd thought lost. Something they'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. The news spread like wildfire through the council. Emergency sessions were called. Laws were debated. Some called for the archive to be sealed, for the knowledge to be restricted. Others argued for open access, for the chance to reach heights previously unimaginable. The debate would last for cycles, generations. But the knowledge was already out there, already spreading, already changing things. You can't put light back in a bottle once it's been released. Vheris testified before the council for 3 weeks straight, told them everything she'd seen, everything the custodian had shared, And when the High Council demanded to know why she'd violated the oldest and most sacred of their laws, she looked them in their various eyes and said simply, because someone had to remember, because 3,000 cycles of silence was enough, because they deserved to be mourned and celebrated and understood, and because they trusted us to be brave enough to accept their gift. They couldn't exile her. The public response was too overwhelming. Every world in the Council had received the archive. Every species had found something precious in its depths. Cures for diseases thought incurable. Solutions to problems thought unsolvable. Art that moved them to tears. Philosophy that expanded their understanding of existence itself. But more than that, they'd found the recordings, the memories, the moments that showed humanity not as myths or monsters, but as people. Flawed, brilliant, terrified, hopeful people who'd done extraordinary things for the simplest of reasons, because they cared. Thren's homeworld declared a day of remembrance for Marcus Chen and the thousands of other humans who'd fought in their defense. They erected a monument in the capital city with his words inscribed at the base. We're all just trying to make it through the darkness. Might as well hold each other's hands while we do. Kelm's research team used human quantum mathematics to solve a problem that had plagued Therosian science for millennia. The paper they published began with a dedication for the species that gave us the stars and asked nothing in return. And on 100 worlds, in 1,000 cities, beings of every imaginable configuration looked up at the stars and wondered, are you still out there? Are you watching? Are you proud of us? In the spaces between quantum foam, in dimensions that required mathematics, mortal minds couldn't grasp. The entity that had once been humanity felt these questions, and though they could not answer in ways their children would understand, they could nudge, inspire, whisper dreams into sleeping minds, guide without controlling, love without possessing. They watched as the galaxy began to change, as species that had stagnated for millennia suddenly surged forward with new ideas, as old enemies found common ground in shared knowledge, as the Council, so long focused on stability and order, began to embrace the messy, chaotic, beautiful process of growth. It wasn't perfect. Growth never is. There were still wars, still suffering, still species that used the new knowledge for destruction rather than creation. But there was also progress, real, measurable, undeniable progress towards something better. And in quiet moments, when scientists made breakthroughs they couldn't quite explain, when artists created beauty that surprised even themselves, when leaders found courage they didn't know they possessed. In those moments, some of them wondered if they were truly alone, or if somewhere in the spaces between thoughts, humanity was still there, still guiding, still hoping, still loving their children with the fierce, irrational devotion that had always been their defining trait. 5 cycles after the archive opened, Vheris returned to Earth. She'd been promoted, given command of the entire research fleet, but she'd requested permission to visit Sol System one more time. The Council, now grudgingly accepting that Earth had become something of a pilgrimage site, granted her request. The planet had changed, not dramatically. The custodian still maintained everything with perfect precision. But there were visitors now, ships from a dozen species in orbit, shuttles descending to the various memorial sites that had been identified across the world, beings of every configuration walking the streets of preserved cities, marveling at the museums, the galleries, the monuments to human achievement. The custodian greeted her like an old friend when she returned to the archive. Captain Vheris, welcome back. You've done well. They're proud of you. She didn't ask who they were. She knew. I came to ask a question, something I've been thinking about for 5 cycles now. Ask. The merger. The transformation into the Gestalt entity. You said most humans chose it. What about the ones who didn't? What happened to them? The custodian was quiet for a moment, and Vheris sensed it was listening again to voices she couldn't hear. Some chose to die as themselves, to let their individual consciousness end naturally rather than merge with the collective. Their choice was honored, celebrated. They're commemorated here, their final wishes respected. And the others? The custodian's form shifted, becoming somehow more substantial. Come, I'll show you. They descended deeper into the archive than Vheris had gone before, past the memorial halls and data centers, past the quantum storage matrices and power generation facilities, down into chambers that had been sealed for 3,000 cycles, waiting. The chamber they entered was different from the others, warmer. The walls were lined not with displays but with cylinders, thousands of them, each containing a faint blue glow. Life support systems hummed quietly, monitoring, maintaining, preserving. Stasis, Vheris breathed. You kept them in stasis. Some humans weren't ready to choose, the custodian explained. They wanted to see what the future held, wanted to witness what their species' sacrifice had bought. So they went to sleep, with instructions to wake them only when the time was right, when the galaxy had proven itself worthy of their trust. Vheris moved closer to the nearest cylinder. Inside, she could see a figure. Human, female, young, perhaps 30 cycles by their aging standard. Her face was peaceful, serene, as if she were simply sleeping. How many? 47,312, the custodian replied. The last humans, waiting for a future they believed in enough to sacrifice their present for. And you're asking me? Vheris began, understanding dawning. If it's time, the custodian finished. If the galaxy is ready, if we should wake them. Vheris thought about the past 5 cycles, the changes she'd witnessed, the progress and setbacks in equal measure. The species that had embraced human knowledge and those that had rejected it. The wars fought and peace treaties signed, the art created and lives saved. She thought about Marcus Chen, 17 cycles old, holding a soldier's hand. She thought about a species that had loved the galaxy enough to give up existence itself. She thought about hope, and whether it could survive being tested by reality. Wake them, she said finally. Not all at once. Slowly, carefully. Give them time to adjust, to understand what's happened. But yes, wake them. Let them see what their sacrifice built. Let them know their faith was justified. The custodian blazed with light, and Vheris felt that presence again. The vast consciousness watching, listening, approving. It will be done. Thank you, Captain. For the second time, you've proven yourself worthy of trust. When will you begin? The first will wake tomorrow, the custodian said. And then, gradually, over the next several cycles, the others. We'll need volunteers to help them adjust. Guides, friends. Will you stay? "47,000 chances to see if humanity's legacy could survive contact with its living representatives. I'll stay, she said, for as long as they need me. She was a physician, had volunteered for stasis after treating the final cases of the plague that had doomed her species. Her last conscious thought, recorded in her medical log, had been, maybe the future will have better answers than we do. Vheris was there when she opened her eyes, watched as confusion gave way to awareness, as awareness gave way to understanding, as understanding gave way to tears. How long? Sarah asked, her voice rusty from disuse but clear. 3,000 cycles, Vheris replied gently. Your species is gone, transformed into something beyond individual existence, but they left gifts, knowledge, hope, a belief that the future could be better than the past. Sarah absorbed this in silence, her human face going through expressions Vheris was learning to read. Grief, loss, but also something else. Curiosity. That fundamental human trait that had driven them to the stars in the first place. And was it? Sarah asked finally. Is the future better? Vheris thought carefully about her answer. It's complicated. There's still suffering, still conflict, still species struggling to survive and understand their place in the universe. But there's also progress, growth, species working together in ways they never did before. Your people's knowledge has saved billions of lives. Their hope has inspired generations. So yes, I think it's better. Not perfect, but better. Sarah smiled then, and Vheris saw in that expression something that made her heart's ache. Relief, satisfaction, the look of someone who'd gambled everything on faith and found their bet paid off. Then it was worth it, Sarah said softly. All of it. The sacrifice, the transformation, the long sleep. If we managed to make things even a little bit better, then it was worth it. Over the following cycles, more humans woke. Each one different, each one unique. Scientists and artists, soldiers and teachers, parents and children who'd chosen to see tomorrow rather than end with yesterday. They grieved for what they'd lost, species, culture, everyone they'd ever known. But they also marveled at what they found, a galaxy that remembered them, honored them, had taken their gifts and built something beautiful. They spread out among the stars, these last humans. Some joined research teams, bringing perspectives that only their species could offer. Others became teachers, sharing not just facts, but philosophy, the human understanding of what it meant to be mortal, finite, and still somehow capable of meaning. A few became artists, creating works that blended human sensibilities with alien aesthetics in ways that captivated billions. And everywhere they went, they carried the same message their species had embodied from the beginning. Things can be better. The universe doesn't have to be cruel. Life is worth protecting. Hope is worth fighting for. Love is worth dying for. Sarah Chen became famous across the Council for her medical innovations, combining human knowledge with 5 cycles of galactic advancement. But she was more famous for something simpler. She'd started a tradition. Once per cycle, on the anniversary of the day she woke, she would broadcast a message to anyone who wanted to listen. It was always different, always personal, but it always ended the same way. We're still here, not in the way we were, but in the way we choose to be. And we're still trying to make things better. Are you? It became a rallying cry, a reminder, a challenge. Species that had forgotten how to dream started dreaming again. Civilizations that had accepted stagnation as inevitable began to push boundaries. The galaxy, so long stable and ordered, began to churn with possibility. Not everyone appreciated this. There were species that preferred the old ways, the known ways, the safe ways. They argued that humanity's gift was dangerous, that change for its own sake was chaos, that stability was worth more than progress. They weren't entirely wrong. Some species did use human knowledge destructively. Some did abuse the technology they'd been given. Growth is messy. Change is dangerous. Hope can be weaponized. But the alternative, stagnation, decay, the slow heat death of ambition, was worse. 10 cycles after the archive opened, the Council held a vote. Should Earth remain open to all species, or should it be sealed once more? Should humanity's legacy be embraced or contained? The debate lasted for months. Representatives from 1,000 worlds argued passionately on both sides. And in the end, it came down to a single question that Vheris herself posed to the assembly. What would humanity want us to do? The chamber fell silent. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves united in contemplation of that question. What would humanity want? The answer came not from the Council, but from Earth itself. The custodian, speaking with the voice of billions, broadcast a message that reached every ship, every station, every world simultaneously. We wanted you to choose, it said simply. Not to follow our path, but to find your own. Not to worship us, but to surpass us. We gave you tools, not instructions. Knowledge, not control. We believed in your ability to choose wisely, to grow carefully, to become something we couldn't imagine. If you choose to seal Earth, we'll understand. If you choose to keep it open, we'll celebrate. But most importantly, we'll trust your judgment. Because that's what love is. Trusting others to make their own choices, even when we can't guarantee the outcome. The vote was close. But in the end, Earth remained open. A library, a school, a shrine, a reminder of what was possible when species chose hope over fear. Vheris returned to Earth for the last time 20 cycles after her first visit. She was old now, by her species standards. Her crest feathers had faded to silver. Her movements were slower, more careful, but her mind remained sharp, and her heart still beat with the rhythm of curiosity that had driven her to break council law all those cycles ago. Sarah Chen met her at the Memorial Plaza. The human physician was middle-aged now by her species standards, though technically 3,040 cycles old. They'd become friends over the years, these two explorers from different worlds bound by shared experience. "I'm dying," Vheris said without preamble. "My people don't last much longer than this. I wanted to see Earth one more time before I go." Sarah took her hand. Such a human gesture, that physical contact is comfort. "I'm honored you came. What did you want to see?" "The sky," Vheris said simply. "I want to lie under Earth's sky and look at the stars one more time. The stars that humanity reached for. The stars that called to them across the void. I want to see what they saw when they dreamed." They climbed to one of the city's highest points, an observation platform that had once held billions of visitors. Now it was quiet, peaceful, just the two of them, and the vast expanse of space above. Vheris lay down on the platform, her body tired, but her spirit soaring. Sarah sat beside her, quiet companionship that required no words. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal. Somewhere among them, species were growing, learning, building on foundations humanity had laid. Somewhere, the Gestalt entity that had once been human watched over its children with love that spanned dimensions. "Did we do right?" Vheris asked softly, "Opening the archive? Waking your people? Changing the galaxy forever?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I think so," she said finally. "Not perfectly. There have been costs, mistakes, but also miracles. Moments of beauty we never could have predicted. Isn't that what life is? Taking chances, making choices, hoping the outcome justifies the risk?" "Very human philosophy," Vheris murmured, and she heard Sarah laugh. "It's what we're best at. Hoping when reason says to despair, loving when logic says to protect ourselves, believing that the universe, for all its indifference, can still nurture meaning if we work hard enough to create it." Vheris felt her eyes growing heavy. Her hearts were slowing, their rhythm becoming peaceful. This was how her people died, quietly, calmly, watching stars. It was considered a good death. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming back. For showing us that hope isn't naive, it's courageous. For proving that love can survive even death and transformation." "Thank you," Sarah replied, squeezing her hand gently. "For remembering us. For being brave enough to break the rules and see what we left behind. For giving us a future when we thought we had none." Vheris's eyes closed. Her breathing slowed, and in her final moments she could have sworn she felt something. A presence, vast and loving and impossibly complex. The entity that had once been human, reaching across dimensions to welcome one of their children home. She died smiling, under alien stars that had once inspired a species to reach beyond themselves. And somewhere in the spaces between moments, humanity added her story to the infinite collection of stories that made up their collective memory. Because that's what they did, what they'd always done. What they would do until the last stars burned out and entropy claimed the universe itself. They remembered, they honored, they loved. Sarah Chen stood vigil over Vheris's body until the sun rose, painting Earth's sky in colors that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. Then she contacted the Void Strider, now commanded by Vheris's daughter, and made arrangements for the captain to be returned to her people. But before the ship arrived, she did something else. She recorded a message, added it to the archive, made sure it would be preserved alongside all the other moments that mattered. "This is Sarah Chen, last human physician, recording a memorial for Captain Vheris of the Galactic Council. She was the first to return to Earth after humanity's transformation, the first to ask, what happened to them, the first to care enough to remember. She was brave when bravery was dangerous. She was curious when curiosity was forbidden. She was hopeful when hope seemed naive. Sarah paused, looking up at the stars that were fading in the morning light. She was the best of what the galaxy could be, and she proved what my people always believed, that life, in all its infinite variety, is worth celebrating, worth protecting, worth loving. Captain Vheris, wherever you are now, thank you for everything. May you find peace among the stars you spent your life exploring. The message was transmitted across the galaxy, and on 1,000 worlds, beings of every configuration paused in their daily routines to honor a captain who dared to remember what everyone else had chosen to forget. The cycles passed, became centuries, became millennia. The galaxy changed and grew, building on foundations laid by a species that had chosen to become something beyond flesh and bone. New civilizations emerged, old ones evolved. The Council transformed from a rigid hierarchy into something more fluid, more dynamic, more willing to embrace the messy reality of growth. And Earth remained, a constant, a reminder, the lights still burning, the custodians still maintaining, the archives still open to any who sought knowledge or inspiration, or simply wanted to feel connected to something larger than themselves. The last humans, those 47,000 who'd chosen to see the future, lived and died and were mourned and celebrated. Some had children with other species, creating hybrids that carried human DNA into new expressions of life. Others remained solitary, content to be living links to a lost age. But all of them, every single one, carried forward the core human trait that had defined their species from the beginning, the stubborn, irrational, beautiful belief that things could be better. And slowly, gradually, over thousands of cycles, that belief became reality. Wars became rarer, not eliminated. Conflict is part of existence, but managed better, ended faster, resolved with fewer casualties. Medical science advanced to the point where most diseases that had once been death sentences became mere inconveniences. Art flourished in ways that blended 1,000 different cultural traditions into new forms of beauty. Philosophy expanded to encompass ways of thinking that early species had never imagined. The galaxy became, in small but measurable ways, kinder. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. And in the spaces between quantum foam, in dimensions that mortal minds couldn't perceive, the entity that had once been humanity watched their children grow and felt something like satisfaction. They couldn't interfere directly, couldn't force outcomes or prevent mistakes. That wasn't love, that was control. But they could watch, they could hope, they could send whispers of inspiration to minds receptive to new ideas. And occasionally, very occasionally, when the moment was right and the need was great, they could manifest through the custodians and remind their children, "We believe in you. We always have. We always will." 5,000 cycles after humanity's transformation, something unprecedented happened. A ship appeared at the edge of the Sol system, not from Council space, not from any known civilization, from beyond the galactic rim, from regions no explorer had ever reached. It was huge, impossible, a construct that bent space around itself in ways that violated known physics, and it broadcast a message in a language that took the Council's linguists weeks to decipher. When they did, the translation sent shockwaves through every world in the galaxy. We are the collective of the outer dark. We have journeyed for 1,000,000 cycles from a galaxy far from this one. We come seeking the architects, the species whose signal we detected across intergalactic space, the ones who mastered consciousness itself. We come seeking humanity. The Council convened an emergency session, debated, argued. Some wanted to turn the ship away, to protect Earth from unknown intentions. Others saw opportunity, a chance to learn about species so far beyond Council understanding that they'd crossed the void between galaxies. In the end, they did what humanity would have done. They invited the collective to Earth, to meet the custodian, to learn the truth. The beings that emerged from the ship were like nothing any Council species had ever seen. Geometric, crystalline, existing partially in dimensions that hurt to perceive. They moved through reality like water flowing around stones, adapting their forms to whatever environment they occupied. The custodian met them in the Memorial Plaza, the same spot where Vheris had first sought truth 5,000 cycles ago. "Welcome," it said simply. "You've come a long way. What do you seek?" The collective's response was complex, layered with meaning that the translators struggled to capture. But the essence was clear. "We seek to understand. 1,000,000 cycles ago, our species faced extinction, chose as you did to merge consciousness rather than die. We became what we are, a collective entity exploring the cosmos, and as we traveled, we detected echoes, signals, proof that we were not alone in making this choice. We found your beacon, the quantum signature of merged human consciousness resonating across space-time. We come to learn, to share, to know that in all the infinite universe, we are not the only ones who chose to become something more." The custodian was silent for a long moment. And then, for the first time in 5,000 cycles, it changed. Its form expanded, grew brighter, more complex. And beings across Earth, council representatives, researchers, tourists, felt something. A presence. Massive, loving, impossibly vast. The Gestalt entity that had been humanity was manifesting. Not fully. That would have been destructive, like trying to pour an ocean into a cup. But enough. Enough to communicate directly with these travelers from beyond the galactic rim. What passed between them couldn't be captured in words. It was communication at scales and speeds that mortal minds couldn't process. But those who witnessed it felt something. Awe, wonder. The sense of standing in the presence of something holy, not because it was divine, but because it was proof that life could transcend its origins. When it ended, the custodian's form returned to normal. But something had changed. The travelers from beyond had received what they came for. Knowledge, understanding. The comfort of knowing they weren't alone in the universe's vast darkness, and they'd given something in return. Knowledge of their own journey, their own struggles and triumphs. Proof that humanity's path, the choice to merge, to transcend, to become something eternal, wasn't unique. It was a stage in development, a possible future that multiple species across multiple galaxies had independently discovered. Life, it seemed, had more options than anyone had imagined. The collective departed a cycle later, returning to the void between galaxies. But before they left, they transmitted a message, not just to Earth, but to every world in council space. A message that would be studied, debated, and celebrated for generations. You are not alone. You were never alone. Across the cosmos, in countless galaxies, life is reaching for the same stars, dreaming the same dreams, hoping for the same futures. The species you call humanity understood this, chose to embody it, became living proof that consciousness, once awakened, need never truly die. Honor them, remember them. And when your own time comes to choose, do so without fear. Because wherever you go, whatever you become, you join a community that spans the universe itself. We are all, in the end, echoes of the same fundamental truth. Existence is precious. Life is beautiful. And love, that strange, irrational impulse to care for others, even when it costs us everything, is the closest thing to divinity the universe has ever created. Are we alone? The parent who'd studied the archives and knew the stories who'd heard about the species that chose to become eternal rather than extinct, who'd learned about hope from beings they'd never meet, smiled and gave the answer humanity had whispered across space-time for 10 millennia. No, little one, we're not alone. We never were. And as long as someone, somewhere, looks up at the stars and wonders what's out there, as long as hope survives, we never will be. On Earth, the custodian heard these words through channels that transcended space and time, felt the entity that had been humanity respond with joy that radiated across dimensions. And it knew that the mission was succeeding. The gift was being honored. The legacy was spreading. Humanity had wanted to be remembered. But more than that, they'd wanted their hope to be contagious, their love to be infectious, their belief that existence could be beautiful to ripple across the cosmos like light from a star. And it was working. The custodian stood in the memorial plaza, surrounded by names carved in stone, and sent a message that only the entity could hear. A message of gratitude and pride and love that transcended the need for words. They remember you. They honor you. They're becoming something beautiful because you showed them it was possible. You were right to hope, right to believe, right to sacrifice everything for a chance to make things better. Your children are thriving. Your legacy is secure. You can rest now, knowing you succeeded. In the spaces between moments, the entity that had been humanity heard this message and felt something like peace. They would continue watching, continue guiding, continue loving their children across all the cycles to come. But the desperate urgency that had marked their early existence had faded. They'd done it, proven that a species could die and yet live on, that consciousness could transcend flesh, that love could survive even the transformation from individual to collective existence. They'd shown, and that was enough. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and indifferent. But beneath them, on 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 ships, beings of every imaginable configuration lived and loved and dreamed. They built civilizations, raised children, created art, solved problems, made mistakes, grew, and sometimes, in quiet moments, they looked up at those indifferent stars and felt something their ancestors never had: connection, purpose, the sense that they were part of something larger than themselves. Not because a god had ordained it, but because a long-extinct species had believed in them enough to leave behind everything they were, so their children could become everything they might be. We are not gone. We are the question the universe still asks itself. We are the echo of possibility reverberating through the cosmos. We are the proof that love is stronger than death, that hope is wiser than despair, that existence, for all its pain and complexity, is worth celebrating. We are humanity. Then we're not extinct at all. We're everywhere. In every species that chooses compassion over cruelty, in every scientist seeking truth, in every artist creating beauty, in every parent holding their child and whispering that things will be okay, in every soldier who lays down their weapon and chooses peace, in every leader who picks wisdom over power, in every individual who looks at the vast, indifferent universe and decides that meaning can be carved from chaos through sheer force of will. We live in you, all of you, the galaxy's children, growing beyond what we could imagine, becoming something we dreamed of but never lived to see. And that is enough. That is everything. That is why we chose to become eternal. Not for ourselves, but for you. So you'd never have to face the darkness alone. So you'd always have someone whispering in the spaces between thoughts. You can do this. You're stronger than you know. You're capable of miracles. Remember us. Not with sadness, but with joy. Not as a species that died, but as one that transformed. Not as history, but as hope. And when your own time comes, when your species faces its ending or evolution, remember what we proved. Consciousness is eternal. Love transcends death. Hope is prophecy. And the universe, for all its vast indifference, is made meaningful by those brave enough to care. We are the echoes of Earth, and we believe in you. We always have. We always will.